Okay, I see Dinesh and Ishwar just joined. My question was, before I start today's session, please let me know anyone has got any questions. Okay, I see a question from how to edit maintenance plan. You just need to right click on that maintenance plan and you can find an option called modify. And it will give you some graphical method. It's not a wizard, but it will give you a graphical method where you just need to double click on each and every task. It will give you more options. When do we use new maintenance plan tab? As it says new maintenance plan, when you want to create a new maintenance plan, we go for a new maintenance plan. But if you want to modify any existing maintenance plan, then obviously you need to select the maintenance plan, right click and select modify. So any more questions, Venkat? Yes, we have two options to create a new maintenance plan. Either you can create using wizard or you can create using BI tools. I've taken you through the wizard. Venkat have already replied your email with the details. Venkat, did you got the email? I see a question. While creating separate maintenance plans for full differential and long backups respectively, do we need to select the required administrative task for every time? No, it's not required. If you are required to create a maintenance plan for full backups, you can only select the full backup task from that maintenance plan. And if you want to create a differential or log backups, then you can create a separate maintenance plans for that. And for index optimization or integrity check or update stats, you can create a separate maintenance plan. So any more questions? Okay, all right. So let us go through today's session with where we discuss about different database status in SQL Server. So let me share my screen. Can you confirm that you are able to see my screen? Okay, all right. Let me take you through about the different database status. The online one, the first is online one, so it's by default. If your database is online, that means the users can access the data and they can manipulate the data. And by default, what are the databases you can see here? These are all databases are online. If to confirm whether the databases is online or I hope it is fine now. Sorry, I just moved to a new place, so it's a bit disturbance over here. So is it all right now? Okay. So the first type of database data is online. That means if the database is online, that means you can, or any users can access and manipulate the data. So if you can go to the SQL Server, and if you are able to see a database, and beside that, if you don't see any message, then try to expand the database and expand the tables. That means that indicates the database is online. And to further check whether it is accessible for everything like reads and writes, probably you can use a simple command in SQL saying that select star from sys.databases. Just execute this statement. It will give you the status of all the databases on your instance. You can scroll to right side. The first column is the database name, and you can scroll to right side. So this is the column that will give you the status of the database, whether the database is online or offline, or recovery pending or restoring. So but obviously our responsibility is to keep our databases online and accessible all the time for the users. And the second type of status is offline. It's a quite opposite to online. If your database is offline, that means no users can connect to the database. So let me quickly show you how to bring a database online. So you can just right click on the database and go to task, and there you see an option called take offline. So select this option. So this will bring your database offline, and now we cannot access this database. So let me refresh it. Okay, you can see I cannot access the database offline. And in what situation we bring the database offline? So most probably in my personal case, I used to bring database offline in case of migrations. To give an example, I was requested to migrate a database from one instance onto the other instance. So once I have done with the migration, the database on the old server, what I do is I bring the database to offline. I bring the database to offline mode on the old server, and I keep it there for a week at least, so that I'm just giving a buffer period for the application team to ensure everything is working for them on the new server after the migration. And once they are happy, I'm gonna back to the old server, and I'm going to delete that offline database. So just to be at safe side, we keep the database offline for a week or 2 weeks, and if there are no objections or concerns raised, we go ahead and drop the database. And the third type of state is a suspect state. I will take you through the demo for this one, and for time being, just leave suspect and emergency mode. And then the fifth one is a read-only mode. As it sounds, if you bring your database into read-only mode, that means you can only read the data from the database. You cannot manipulate the data from the database. So to bring the database into read-only mode, you can right click on any database and go to properties. On left hand side, you can go to options, and immediately on right hand side, if you scroll down, you can see here database read only. So by default it will be false. If you want to make your database read only, then you can just make it to true, and you can click OK. And you can see now the database is in read only. So at this moment, I can only read the data from this table. I cannot manipulate the data from this database. So if you are required, or if you are requested, if someone asks you to, can you please bring the database into read-only mode for a certain time, then this is the way you have to do it. And the next one is a standby mode. Standby mode, we normally use it when we configure log shipping. So for time being, uh, I will hold on this one, standby. I will show you when we discuss about the log shipping. And the next one is a restoring mode. I hope you are a bit familiar about the restoring mode. Read only for every role. I didn't understand your question, Venkat. Can you retype your question? Once I brought this database into read-only mode, that means everyone on this instance can only read the data on this database. For other database, they can manipulate the data, but specifically for this database, even though you have sysadmin rights or database owner, still you can only read the data. That's what this feature is. Restoring mode we have already seen. While restoring a database backup, when we choose with no recovery option, during that time the database will go into restoring mode. So do you want me to show it again, or you are okay with that? When we had a demos for restoring databases like full and log, we have restored full backup with no recovery option. So during that time the database went into restoring mode. So that's what the status. So is everyone all right? Okay. So the next is a multi-user mode. By default, the database will be in multi-user mode. Multi-user mode in the mean multiple users can access the database at same time. So by default, this feature will be enabled. And the next is a single user. If you want to make a only single connection to the database, then you can still bring the database into single user mode. Once you bring the database into single user mode, then at any point of time only one user can connect to that database. So usually we bring the database into single user mode when we do some administrative task, or when we try to uh, when you try to troubleshoot any database in perspective of corruption. During that time we bring the database into single user mode. And the restricted access is something you are restricting the database access to a specific user. So the multi-user, single user and restricted user, these settings you can go onto database properties. You can find all these settings at one place. You can go to options and you can scroll down. And you can see here the last column, restrict access. In restrict access, by default it is multi-user. That means multiple users can access the database at same time. So you do have other options over here. The single user, if I select this single user option here, then only one person can access the database at any point of time. And if I change this to restricted user, then only the database owners and the system administrators can access to the database. So when do we go for restricted access? It is when you are asked to run some database scripts or deployments on a database that is going to change the data. During that time you don't want other users to access the data. So most probably during the deployment time we bring the database into restricted access. What will be the result if second user try to access? If the database is in single user mode, then it will not allow. It says the database is in single user mode, your connection cannot be established. So I have left off with the suspect, emergency and standby. So standby, having said that, we'll discuss about this when we are on topic called log shipping. But for suspect is if your database is in suspect mode, that means the database has got corrupted. The database got corrupted. So there are certain ways to troubleshoot and resolve the issue. So I will take you through that. So probably in order to bring my database into suspect, I have to corrupt one of my database files. Usually corruption happens when you have a disk subsystem errors, or if someone manually go and change the files, the underlying files, but usually it won't happen. But probably, most probably, the case or the reason would be because of the disk subsystem errors, disk IO errors. And if you notice your database is in a recovery pending state, as you can see here, a database is in offline read only. Sometimes you might see database is in, so at sometimes the database will show in recovery pending mode. So as it sounds, when you restart your databases or when you restart your SQL instance, during that time, once the SQL instance come online, it will try to recover all your databases. Let me give an example. Assume that I'm doing some transactions at the moment, and all of a sudden, due to some power outage or due to some hardware issue, my machine has got rebooted all of a sudden. So during that restart, there are some transactions that are currently going on databases. So once there is a force restart happened on my server, when it comes online, that time SQL Server will check all those ongoing transactions and they will roll back. All the uncommitted transactions will be rolled back. So SQL Server might take some seconds to minutes to roll back those transactions. Depends upon the data, how much uncommitted data was pushed onto the database. So depend upon the size of the data, it might take some seconds to minutes to roll back those transactions. So during that time, your database will show in recovery pending. So you might need to go and check the SQL logs. There it will show you that, okay, database 10% got recovered, 15% got recovered. So if you notice that status message, so better I suggest you to wait for some time until SQL Server itself try to recover the database and bring it online. And the other way is a suspect. I see a question from Nagwinder. Suppose the first user has done his job and he's not using the DB, then how do the second user know that DB is free access? No, he doesn't know until he issue a connection again. That is the reason it is not a regular activity we do. As I said, the database will be brought to single user mode only by the DBAs to perform some deployment access or some major scripts to run on the database, and you don't want any other users to connect to the database. So once as a DBA you run the deployment scripts, obviously you have to bring the database back to multi-user. So I have to intentionally corrupt one of the database, so I pick up I try to create a database here. I name it as demo suspect. Okay, I have created a database. So what I do is, in this database, let me create a sample table. Okay, I'm creating a sample table, and I'm gonna insert some data in this table. Okay, I've inserted 3 records in this table. Now what we do is we try to corrupt one of the files in this database. So I have downloaded a tool in order to corrupt the underlying data files. So my data files for this database is sitting on C drive. Okay, so it's C drive default location. It's in data. Okay, these are the 2 files that belongs to my database. So what I do is we'll close this. Okay, in order to corrupt the database files, I need to bring this database offline. It is because as long as this database is online here, it will not allow me to access the underlying files, that is the MDF or LDF files. So let me bring this database into offline. Okay, I need to change this connection. Okay, the database is offline now. So I go to the files here. Let me make a copy of this file. Okay, I made a copy of that file. So now I have downloaded a tool to modify the data in that LDF file. So I'm using this tool. So let me browse to the file. It's in data folder. Okay, I copied the copy file, and this is how the data being stored in the LDF file. So what I do is I make it all 0 in this file. As this is a very tiny database, I just created a single table with couple of rows, so we can't expect much on this one, but still this is how the corruption happens. Okay, so we have changed some hundreds of rows on this one, and just do a save and go back to the file location. Okay, so what I do is I try to rename the existing one. I rename the existing log saying with old, and the one which I have corrupted it, I'm changing it to the main one. Okay. I just renamed. Okay, it should be .ldf. Okay, now we have corrupted the LDF file of the database. So let us try to bring the database into online. Probably I need to restart the session. Let me try to bring this database online. Yeah, you can see here it says the physical file name demo suspect underscore log.ldf may be incorrect. It's nothing but it is assuming the LDF file is not right. It got corrupted. So probably I would have, yeah, you can see here the SQL server, when I try to bring it online, it tried to bring it online and then it noticed the LDF file of this database got corrupted. So that is the reason you can see it says recovery pending. So just before I explained you what a recovery pending is. Sometimes when SQL Server restarts, it tries to bring the database into online while doing some rollbacks at backend. That's the one possibility. If you notice the database is still saying recovery pending, or you want to confirm whether this database is in process of recovering or is it a suspect. So in this case, the database is suspect, but how to confirm it? We can use a simple command saying select database property X, provide the database name, which is demo suspect, with a parameter called status. Execute this query, and this is the output of the status of the database. So it clearly says the database is suspect for this one. Let me check for other database. For CRM, we should get online. So you can see here. So as we have now confirmed that the database is suspect, the next thing is, what is the solution? How to bring this database back to online? So there are two solutions. One is, if you have healthy backups, try to restore them. If you have healthy backups of this database, try to restore them. Or if you don't have any backups, what's the case? So if you don't have any backups, then the steps we need to follow is, first, bring the database into emergency mode. Then after, once we bring the database into emergency mode, you can read the data. When the database is in emergency mode, it allows us to read the data, but we cannot change the data. So the next step is, once we bring the database into emergency mode, the next step, we need to bring the database into single user mode, because we are trying to troubleshoot the database. We are trying to resolve the corruption. So when we run the repair command, or when we are trying to resolve these corruption issues, we don't want any other users connecting this database. So there is a reason we need to bring it into single user mode, and then after, we'll be repairing the database with data loss. So when I say the third point, repairing the database with the data loss, that means we can repair the database by issuing some commands. but the only possibility is your SQL Server will delete those corrupted pages. So we already know that the data will be written in the form of pages in the files, right? So the corruption might have happened on one or two pages in the database. So those one or two pages from the database will be removed off. That is what the repair mean. So when we are deleting or when we are removing those pages from the database, so obviously we need to agree there will be some data loss. Repair is nothing but what are the corrupted pages in the database will be removed from the database. So that is the reason this should be a lost option. If you don't have any backups, you better need to confirm with your manager or the application team before running this repair data loss thing. You need to explain them that using this option there could be some data loss and it would be very tough to find out what data we have lost. So that is the reason we always try to keep our database backups. So in order to bring the database into emergency mode, you need to issue a command called alter database name set emergency. So execute this query and you can refresh the databases here and you should now see the database status is now into emergency. So now it will allow you to just read the data from this table. At the same time, you might get a question like, okay, can I take a backup of this database now? No, it is not possible. You cannot take database backup when it is in emergency mode, but still you can export the tables. You can use import and export wizard. By using that, you can move all your table data to a different database. That is possible. If you have a very tiny database with a few 10 or 15 tables, then you can do that. But imagine this is a very huge table and maybe of 500 gig, so you can't just move that 500 GB from one place to other place or over the network. So once you bring your database into emergency mode, then after, before I repair the database, I need to bring the database into single user mode. So to bring the database into single user mode, I can use alter database name set single user. So once I execute this command, the database will go into single user mode, and at the same time, if any of the other user connected to this database, then it will not allow me to get a second connection. So when you execute this single user connection, you should be able, you should be very fast to execute further commands, or else someone can acquire the connection on the database. So now the database is in single user mode. Did I execute it or not? Okay. Okay, I have brought the demo suspect database into single user mode, and then after I need to run the repair command. So it's dbcc check db. The first is I need to use this database, use demo suspect, go dbcc check db, demo suspect with repair allow data loss. I need to check this command, just give me a moment. Okay, so this is a command with no info messages and all messages. Okay, no, it's not possible. We cannot use any GUI. That is the reason I'm using the queries, or else I would have preferred showing you the GUI. So these things you need to use the queries. So let me execute the repair command. Okay, the repair was done, but there was still some error message. You can see here the first it tried to read the LDF file and it said it's not a valid because it got corrupted. And then after, what it does is the log for the database has been rebuilt. So the SQL Server, when we ask it to repair, so what it does is it tried to remove the data from the LDF and it has built a new log file. So whatever the data we had in the log file is lost. So now the repair has been done, so we can bring the database into multi-user mode. The commands are very simple. There are no Jordan words. It's very straightforward. When you read this one, you can easily understand what it is doing. So using this command, we are bringing our database into multi-user mode. And now you can refresh and you can see the database is back online. But the only possible is the data loss. You need to agree that there could be some data loss has happened on your database. What are the transactions that are in your LDF file and not yet committed to the MDF file will be lost. So these are the steps you need to remember. If in case you were asked a question like how do you troubleshoot a suspect database, so the answer should be, the first thing is, if you have a healthy backups, try to restore them. If you don't have a healthy backups, then you need to bring your database into emergency mode, then after bring the database into single user mode, and then run the dbcc check db with repair allow data loss, and then after bring the database into multi-user mode. So these are the steps we need to follow to resolve a suspect database. So any questions? And this is a very rare, you might find these issues in very rare case, but we need to be aware about the troubleshooting steps. The explanation is the same thing I've written over there. And what if the system databases gets corrupted? We have seen how to troubleshoot if the user database is corrupted, but what happens if system database is corrupted? So I've just got a points here. I can't take you through the demo because if I try to corrupt the instance, then probably we might need to wait for another day or two to get back my SQL instance. So I'm just gonna explain you about the steps. How would I know that the corruption DB is now corrected? So you can see here, if your database is corrupted, then earlier it was showing recovery pending, and when you have issued this command, it says suspect. Now let me reissue this command and you can see the database, it shows as online. If you don't see any status beside the database, and if you can expand the database, that confirms your database is online. If you still further confirm, you can browse the table and try to read the data. Does it make sense, Mani? So for system databases, if you notice that your master database is corrupted, if my master database is corrupted, then the SQL services will not come online, right? If you remember the startup parameters, the master database files are part of startup parameters. So if my master.mdf or masterlong.ldf is corrupted, then my SQL services will not come online. So the only option that time is either you need to restore the master database from any healthy backup, or if you don't have any backups, then you have to rebuild the master database. So in order to rebuild the master database, this is the command you have to execute from the command prompt. First, you need to open your command prompt window, then browse to the folder where your setup file exists. Let's say your setup file is in D drive. So let me show you. Once you open the setup file, let me check where my setup file exists. Okay, this is the folder. It's already in C drive. So if you want to change the drive, if you have your setup file on D drive, then you need to provide D colon, so it will go into D, and then choose the folder. So let's say it's issue, then it will go into, sorry, maybe I don't have this name on D drive, so that's the reason it's not showing here. So let me move back to C folder, and then just we need to go to that path where the setup file exists. So it is C SQL 2012 evaluation edition. So this is where, okay, there's a one more folder inside it, SQL full underscore ENU. Probably I need to give one more. Okay, now this is where the setup file exists. So from here onwards, you just need to paste this query by changing some parameters, like you can see here, this is a setup file, and the next parameter is quiet. That means it's a silent installation. When you are install your SQL Server using the wizard, at every wizard you need to provide some options and you need to click on next, right? So here when you choose quiet option, that means you are asking your server that don't wait for my input. I am not going to uh, select the next or finish button. So please do yourself. That's what the quiet mean. It's a silent installation. It will, your server will not ask for anything for you. And the next is action, what you want to perform. So if you say rebuild database, then obviously it will rebuild your master database or your system databases. Then after, if you have any named instance, provide the named instance, or else just provide MS SQL Server, which is a default one. And then after, you need to provide the system admin account, because once we rebuild all our system databases, then obviously what all the logins on the instance and the databases or the jobs or the maintenance plan, all of them will be removed. So when you rebuild your system databases, all the existing user databases, logins, everything will be removed. It's nothing but a fresh SQL installation. So with this command, you need to provide account credentials, like once you rebuild your databases, whatever the login you had earlier will be lost. So you need to have access to browse this instance, so provide a system administrative account with the password. This account name, provide your DBA group or your name, so that once the rebuild happens, you will be able to connect to that instance, and provide the password as well. And the next one is a collision type. If you remember, while we are installing our SQL Server, have raised a point about the collision type. If you want to change the collision type of the installation, the only thing is you have to rebuild your system databases. So you can use the same command for that. If you want to change your collection type, then you can provide a new collection type. And if you once you execute this whole command in SQL, it will hardly take maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and it will rebuild your complete instance. That means it will be a fresh installation, and obviously whatever the user databases you have, everything will be lost. So the only option is you have to re you have if you have any backups of those databases, you have to restore them one by one. And in order to restore a master database, then the first option is, if the master database is corrupted, the only option is to rebuild in case you don't have any backups. If you have a backup, then probably you need to bring the SQL instance into single user mode. Just before we talked database into single user mode, right? And now the requirement is to perform a restore on master database, so we need to bring the instance into single user mode. We can do that by issuing -m command, -m parameter in startup parameters. If you remember the startup parameters, where you can go to the configuration manager and then properties of the SQL instance, there you can find the startup parameters. So you need to append -m parameter to that startup parameters. With that, if you do a quick restart, your SQL instance will start with single user mode. That means only one connection will be possible for entire SQL instance. Even though you have 100 databases over there, only one connection is possible to that instance. And then after, we restore from the backup using command prompt. And to restore, it's a very rare case. In my 9 years of experience, I haven't got a situation about restoring a master database. I got a requirement to run this command, but it is not again for a master database corrupt, but it is for a collision type. I have chosen a default collision type and have installed. Later, after an hour, after the installation has been done, the user came back and said that we need a custom collision type. So I ran this procedure or this command with the updated collision type over here, so that obviously changes. And the best part is, during that time I don't have any user databases running on that instance, so it was a very fresh SQL instance. And in order to restore the Msdb, you need to stop the SQL agent service, and you need to restore from the backup. The same way how we do for user databases, we need to follow the same thing, but the only thing is you need to stop the agent service. And for model, we can restore normally as our user database. How we do for user database restore, the same way we can do for model database. And the other requirement is, how do we move system databases from one place to other place within the server? Let's assume my system databases. Let me check where my system database exists. I can issue a command called sp_help_db master. There's a question: if you got lost your database and you know backup of the database, is there any way to recover the data loss? No. If you don't have a backup, and if the database is in suspect, then the only option you left with the repair option with the data loss. So that is the reason, as a DBA, we need to ensure that every database has backup. So you can see here my master database files are residing on C drive. Okay, let me copy these two files. Now the requirement is I was asked to remove these two files out of C drive. Probably there are some maintenance going on and they don't want the SQL databases to be hosted on a C drive, or by mistake you have created master system database on C drive, but now you have to move them out. So the requirement is I have to move the databases from C drive onto probably D drive. How do we do that? So the simplest way is we need to go to the configuration manager, SQL Server configuration manager, and we need to edit the startup parameters, because when the service restarts, the SQL Server service will gonna check those two files. What are those two files? These are the two files the SQL Server will gonna check, and there's a one more file, that's the error log file. But the requirement is for us to change the location of these two files from C onto D. So for that we need to go to the SQL Server service and go to properties and edit the startup parameters. You can go to the startup parameters, and this is for -d indicates data file. So the destination to where I'm gonna move the files is onto D drive, maybe to data. So this is the destination where I have to move those two files. So you can go to the configuration manager, where it is, properties. Okay, I gonna delete this path and update it with, okay, it's D, sorry, it's D data master, right? And the same thing I need to edit for the log file. Sorry, the first one I haven't clicked on update, so it was not updated. So let me click on update. So I need to rechange this one back to, I'm changing the path over here. Okay, now click on update. So what we are trying to do is we are saying the SQL service that going forward, go and check the MDF file, master MDF file and master LDF file in D drive instead of C. Now go and check in D drive. That's what we are change the startup parameters. So once you change the startup parameters, you need to restart your SQL instances. But before that, we have just changed the startup parameters. Now we are required to move those files physically from C onto D. So I need to stop the SQL service to move the files. If the SQL services are online and running, then it will not allow me to copy the files from C drive. Now the SQL services are stopped, so I can go back to that location where the data files exist. So it is in C program files, then data. Okay, these are the two files, master.mdf, masterlog.ldf. So I will cut these files and go on to D drive, data, and paste it over here. As I have stopped the SQL services, it allowed me to move the files, or else it will not allow me. So that is the reason I have stopped the services. Now restart the services. So when I start the service will check the startup parameters, and obviously I have already updated the SQL service saying that from now onwards you can find the master MDF and master LDF in D drive. There was some error. Maybe I need to check whether I have gave a wrong path or not. D dollar data. D data master. Okay, it's correct. Let me try to start it again. In the meantime, I'm going to check in the event logs. Let me cross check it again. D data master MDF. Okay. Okay, you can see here the error says access denied. That means the service account doesn't have permissions on this folder, data folder. So I need to assign permissions. Properties, security, probably for now we'll make it everyone. What are the service account that is running for the SQL service? That service account doesn't have permissions on. I'm not sure whether the permissions got applied or not. Let me cross check it again. Okay. Now let me try to start this session. Okay, you can see here the service got started up. Let me start the agent as well. Alright, so I hope you understand why it got failed earlier. So you can see here the service account RMVP underscore SQL. This is an account. That account doesn't have permissions on D drive data folder, so that was the reason it was failing to start. And how did I find out the issue? You can always go to the event viewer and it will show you why the service is not coming online. It clearly says that access is denied. So this service is up and running now. Now what I do is I will just re-execute this command and check this file's location. And you can see now the data files for master are located in D drive. So this is how you need to move your database files, especially for master. For other database we have a different method. You don't need to touch the startup parameters. For only master database, you have to change the startup parameters. But for other database, the option is, the one method you can do is detach and attach. You can detach the database from this instance and you can attach them, or once you detach the database, you can copy the MDF and LDF files from that source location and paste it onto destination, and then after reattach that. So let me quickly show you that. Let me take the CRM database. So to find it out, sp underscore help db CRM, and this is the location for my MDF and LDF files for CRM database. Okay, so you can right click on the database and go to task and then detach. It says drop connections. That means what are the connections that are currently onto this database will be closed forcefully and your database will be detached. You can see the CRM database no more exists. So you can go to this path and copy the files. You can go onto the C drive. Let me paste the path over here. Okay, so this is the MDF file and this is the LDF file. So right click on these two files and do a cut, and then go back to the D drive, data, and paste it over here. Okay, now you need to go to the SQL instance. We have detached the database and then we have moved the files, and now we need to attach them. Right click on the database and select attach and click on add. We need to browse the MDF file of the database. So I have moved those files onto D drive, data, then crm.mdf. Browse it. Once you browse the MDF file, if your LDF file is also located on the same location, then it will find it out and you just need to click on OK. And you can see here the database got reattached, and you can execute this command again and you can see the database location has been changed. So this is a one way, and the other way is the detach and attach. What are the method we have seen now? It's a very quick, but there are some risk factors. I have practically seen where it allows the detach, but when you try to attach the database, it will throw an error. It is because when you are detaching the database, during that time we should not have any ongoing transactions on the database. If there are any ongoing transactions, your database will not shut down cleanly. So during that time, while you attach your database, it won't work. Okay, so please do remember this one. The other way we can do is, using the SQL script. That is, the first thing is, if you remember when we were talking about the system databases, we know that all user database information will be stored inside the master database, right? So the other way is, we need to change the path information in system catalog. So let me try to change the CRM database files back from D drive onto C drive. Now currently the database files for CRM are in D drive. So the other method, I use the other method and change back these files back to its original location. So for that, the first thing, I need to execute a command saying that alter database name, modify file, name should be CRM, file name, provide the path, So going back to my original location, it is in C drive. So this is the location. I need to place those files back again. Slash it's crm.mdf, and the same thing I need to use for the LDF file as well. So the logical name of the LDF is crm_log, and change the file name at end. So let me execute these two lines of query. Once I have executed this script, you can see here at bottom the output what we got. The file crm has been modified in system catalog. So what it had happened now is, after executing this query, SQL internally in system databases, it has updated the path. Okay, now we need to move those two files physically from D back to its original location. So if I try to move these files directly from D onto that drive, now it will not allow me. It is because the database is online at the moment. So these two files, if I try to do a cut and go on to this location and try to paste it, it will show you that the action cannot be completed because the file is open in SQL Server. So because of this reason, we always try to bring the database offline in order to move those files. So we can't move it now. The only option is we need to bring this database into offline mode. So right click on the database, go to task and take offline. The second line is in MDF. It should be in LEF. Alright, yeah. Thanks for correcting me. It should be LDF, right? Let me re-execute this or else it's gonna fail. Okay, thank you very much, Nagvender. Okay, I have brought the database offline and now I can ask it to try again. So you can see here now it got copied. Those two files were copied onto backend location. So the simple we have updated the system catalog first, then we brought the database offline and we copied the files across the C drive, and now we just need to bring this database online. So right click on database, go to task and then bring online. So now your database is back to online. To confirm it, you can re-execute the same command sp_help dbcrm and you can check the database files are back onto C drive. So this is the other way. This is the safest method to do, or if you are required to move database files from one location to the other location within the instance, this is a safe method. And the other method is backup and restore. You can take a backup of your database, drop the database from the instance, restore it. It is also a safe method, but it's gonna take more time. But what are the second method we have seen by using the alter command, it will be safe method and quick one. So any more questions? So I would like to stop here. Okay guys, if you don't have any questions, I would like to close the call now, and I will try to upload the session for today by end of the day. Okay guys, thank you very much and have a good day, and we'll be back tomorrow, and I request you to please try to do some practice.